Welcome to Zoo Nation, where we talk about history as it unfolds and talk about the political zoo of a nation that we're living in. My name is Josh.
I'm Nathan.
This is the second episode we've done here in the new studio, if you want to call it that, here in my new living room of the new place. And so great to be back with you. Want to give a shout out to our fans. Thank you for sticking with us. I know the upload schedule has been irregular. I've had some things come up. Nathan has too, and it's great to be back. So we want to talk to you about some things. We want to talk to you, importantly, about comments that Donald Trump has made about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and some comments he's made about vaccines as well. We want to talk about the future of MAGA, the future of the conservative movement, the right, and we want to talk about 2024, the election. We're now in May already, so June is just coming closer and closer. And so we're going to be talking about that. We also have other things to talk about with you guys. Want to talk to you about, this has been something that's really been all over the news, having to do with campus protests, right? You've got campus protests at Harvard and several other college campuses of people holding up signs, many of them pro-Palestinian, but also some pro-Israel, and different people's opinions on that. And then a bill that passed the House regarding the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. We're going to talk about our views on that, as well as informing you about what it is, too. So really, really important to support us. You can support us for free by liking this video and commenting. It really, really helps the YouTube algorithm. Same for Rumble when you're seeing this on Rumble or Odyssey. It really pushes things forward in the algorithm. It's difficult for a new channel to get going, so we would really appreciate that. Also, share it. Make sure that you share this with your friends as well. And again, big shout out, big thank you to all of you who do that. We're very, very thankful for you guys. So I think a good way, helpful way to kick things off is with Robert F. Kennedy and Donald Trump. And I have it on my social media. I was going to read exactly what was said. Real quick, while I pull that up, I wanted to ask you, because I don't know if we've talked about him in a while. I think we have talked about Robert F. Kennedy before, but you tell me, what are your thoughts just in general about Robert F. Kennedy? Whenever you first heard he was running as a Democrat, what did you think? And what do you think about him now?
I mean, no shocker. I mean, he is a Democrat. I mean, yeah, okay, anti-vaccine, cool. You're not going to get the Democratic vote because of the fact that you now don't line up with one of their doctrines, I guess. Yeah, since you don't line up with one of their doctrines now. But other than that, majority of his beliefs, abortion, yeah, just in general, abortion, the border, et cetera, stuff like that. Democratic, moderate, whatever you want to call it. It's yeah. So he wasn't going to get my vote anyway. And I mean, I don't know if we'd be better with him. Well, I mean, like if that was the choice between Biden or, or him.
So that poses a good question. So you have two choices to vote for.
Yeah.
Biden, RFK Jr.
Well, I'm forced to vote. Like I have to. Okay. I mean,
so by that answer, you would stay home if you could.
Oh yeah, for sure, if I could. But if I'm like forced to vote, like, hey, you have to pick
which
one.
is how it is in Australia. I don't know if people know that. You actually have to vote in certain countries.
Yeah. So if I'm forced to vote, I guess hear me out. I guess I'm gonna go Biden because maybe he falls asleep.
I like it. I really like it. So in other words, a sleep leftist is better than an awake leftist.
Yeah, right. So it's like
that's great.
Whereas like Kennedy's got some, he knows what he's doing.
Oh yeah.
Versus Biden doesn't. Completely. So it's like. But then again, it's like he's used as a puppet. But if we're going just as the person, right, not the people behind that person or whatever, yeah, I'm going Biden if I have to.
Okay.
And I hate saying that, but if I absolutely had to vote, that those would, yeah.
That's a difficult one for me. I mean, like you, I completely agree. I would stay home if I was allowed. Yeah. But if I had to vote, like we were in a country where voting was mandatory, that's really tough. So I really take your point and I understand it. The reason I actually would not is should the left push out another how do I want to phrase this? Should the establishment and the left push out another virus of some kind who would make it mandatory to get the vax or the treatment and who would not. I have at least more faith in Kennedy in that scenario than I do Biden. And also when it comes to just being, are you a deep state plant or not?
Right.
And Kennedy has talked about his uncle, so JFK,
right,
saying, "Hey, something bad happened there." Like, I don't exactly know what his full-blown thoughts are. He hasn't gone into it in great detail, but he has said, "I think he got too close to some deep state stuff,
right,
and that's why they killed him." Biden either doesn't know or doesn't care, and the people behind Biden not only don't care, they actually are for the deep state.
right.
There's at least a maybe when it comes to RFK. Would he go completely right there with the deep state? It's at least a maybe. Whereas with Biden, to your point, he's asleep. He's not mentally competent.
Right.
However, the people behind him are really who's in charge. So with Kennedy, at least on certain issues, he might go against them. And I take your point. I understand what you're saying. One is a competent leftist. One is an incompetent leftist. But I also look at the people,
which scares me more.
Well, but also I look also at the people behind that person.
Right.
At least with RFK, he might oppose some of the people.
Right.
Whereas with Biden, he doesn't have any clue, or he just rubber stamps whatever they say.
The only problem that I have with that, because again, I understand your point. The only problem I have with that is, does he necessarily, disagree with some of these guys, and is he going to actually, have somewhat of a backbone on what he stands for? The vaccines maybe. But my thing is I guess for me, the biggest thing is recently, he had an interview, I forget who it was with, but he comes out and says,
no one important.
Yeah,
I'll just tell you now.
Clearly nobody important, but they asked him about abortion. And he says, originally he says it should be left up to the states. Then he starts to say, well, it should be left up to the women to choose, the typical Democratic response. And the person asks, even up to 9 months. He says, yes, even up to 9 months. I have a huge problem with that.
Of course.
Now, again, I'm not saying Biden doesn't agree with that stance, or any Democrat doesn't agree with that stance. I'm not saying that, right? But I don't know if a lot of Democrats that openly come out and say something all the way up to 9 months. Most Democrats shy away from the, when do you decide?
Right. Fair.
Which is more scary, one that shies away or one that doesn't. I think honestly the one that doesn't shy away, because you actually can tell, oh man, that person doesn't see life at all.
But are they honest with you more than the others?
I don't know. I think the reason some of them don't answer is because they know somewhat in extent that that baby is still alive. So it's like, I'm not going to say 9 months. I'm not going to say this and that, because I know deep in my heart that's still a child, So I do think that's what's keeping some Democrats away from saying, oh yeah, this term, because they know deep down that that's a child. Versus, Kennedy, it's like, 9 months. Well, okay, in that case, you don't see that as a baby at all,
right?
At any point in time.
So this is cool. I want to read I want to discuss this on many levels, because this could be a really cool discussion about RFK. So real quick, let's read the Truth Social post. So this is from Donald J. Trump. He says, and I'm not going to do an impression of him, although it's very tempting. RFK Jr. is a Democrat plant, a radical left liberal who's been put in place in order to help crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the United States, get reelected. A vote for Jr. would essentially be a wasted protest vote, and that could swing either way, but would only swing against the Democrats if Republicans knew the true story about him. Jr. is totally anti-gun, an extreme environmentalist who makes the Green News scammers look conservative, a big-time taxer and open border advocate and anti-military vet. Family will never allow him to be a Republican, and his chief funder is the VP candidate that nobody ever heard of, except her ex-husband, who's been stripped of a big chunk of cash. She puts herself down as a businesswoman, or maybe a doctor, and actually, I guess you could say that she's right. Her business was doing surgery on her husband's wallet. She's more liberal than Jr. by far, not a serious person, and only a pot of cash to help get her no-chance candidate on the ballot. I lived with RFK Jr. in New York and watched him convince Governor Cuomo to make environmental moves that were outright nasty. Upstate New York was not allowed to drill or frack as Ohio, Pennsylvania, and others ripped off New York energy. Because of this, prices have skyrocketed all over that part of the country, but especially upstate New York and New England. Their energy costs are the highest in the U.S., with the exception of California, run by Gavin Newsom, the worst governor in the state's history. I'd even take Biden over Jr. because our country would last a year or two longer prior to collapse, but it would be dead either way. His views on vaccines are fake, as is everything else about his candidacy. Let the Democrats have RFK Jr. They deserve him. So that's the full post.
Right.
And now he did say another one, but he basically just said this guy's bad, and didn't really add anything of substance, just said he's not good, he's a Democrat plant, etc. And so, real quick, first and foremost, what is your reaction to that?
I mean, I agree with that first half. Well, I mean, the first 3/4 of it. You know?
So if I understand, the only thing is I'd rather take Biden over RFK that you have a problem with.
And the country would survive, like, with both those guys. It's dead. I mean, it's dying as is. You know, I personally, you know, and we'll probably get into this later, but even with Trump, I think we're still going to be going down a downward spiral, even if he does get out. Because of the 2020 election. I mean, it's done the damage. But anyway, I would still take. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe I agree with him to an extent based off of. I mean, I don't know. The issue I have with it is who's calling for any of them. Especially as a Republican or whatever, anybody against the Democrats should not be saying, "Hey, I would rather have." I mean, that's essentially an endorsement to an extent, to me. You know, I do not like. Yeah, I just don't like that at all. So I can't agree with that other half because it's like I don't want either one of them. You know. That's the biggest problem I have with it. And like I said, it's basically like an endorsement. It's like, oh yeah, I'd rather have him, which means again, this could be reading into it a little bit. If you'd rather have him, that means you gotta agree with him to some extent on something, which, I can't find one thing that I really agree with.
So this is interesting. So you said in the beginning of the show that if you had to vote,
right,
you would prefer Biden.
Yes, if I absolutely had.
What's the difference between you saying that and Trump saying this about Biden?
Because first off, he's running against, so he's a candidate that is, out there against both of these guys essentially. So, and then second off, that is endorsed. Like I said, it's virtually an endorsement to an extent, as far as giving praise at least to Biden, who is going to be, Junior doesn't have a shot, that unless something in the media changes, Junior does not have a shot. I don't even think we'll have a third person on the stage. I don't think he'll get that, that vote enough to be on the stage. But anyway, yeah, Junior does not have a shot. So it's basically, I think it's a good way. It's setting yourself up, especially with the media that can run stuff like, hey, well, you've said this in the past. So like, hey, say something good about him, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sorry, this is not a time where you need to be saying good things about your enemy, essentially, and yes, enemy in the sense of they're going against each other and just the two conflicting opinions and views, of life and everything else. That's not something you need to be saying. So, yes, in the choice of I have to versus you don't have to in this case, it's just not one of those things that needs to be said.
Okay. So let me ask this, because you said something that I was actually going to come to, which is you said you don't think that there's going to be three people on that stage. I agree with you. I will say, I think that even if he pulls high enough where by all rights he should be on the stage, they will find some loophole, something to not put him on that stage. Right. They want it to just be Trump and just be Biden.
Why? Because you think he pulls more votes from Biden?
I don't know why. I think that a lot of it has to do with they want it to be good Biden versus bad Trump, probably.
Right.
They don't want there to be any third option. They don't want any distraction from that. They want to just, bring up the media as loud as possible and say, bad Trump, good Biden, bad Trump. And they don't want a third message out there.
Right.
And if they put him on a stage answering any questions at all, number one, even if they did, they would give him hardly any questions.
Right.
Or less time or something. Number two, they're not going to do that. They really think that he is a distraction. They really want Biden to look good against Trump, which I don't know how they're going to do that.
Yeah.
Biden and his people are already saying they're not going to debate. They're not going to give Trump a platform. He's just going to spread misinformation. Whether they debate or not is yet to be seen. I think they probably will have to hold at least one debate. We shall see, though. Now, one thing that was interesting, because within the space that we're in, you've got so many different people that all call themselves conservative and mean pretty radically different things. One thing that was fascinating to me, and I think I talked to you about this 1 or 2 episodes ago, was watching the pro-DeSantis people. Right. Because you kind of had two movements. You had, within the DeSantis movement, you had the people that were just kind of what I would call the chaff, that were basically riding on DeSantis's coattails. And basically, whenever you would hear them speak, they would only bash Trump and hardly give you a good reason why they would vote for DeSantis. I think of people like Bill Mitchell, who went on a debate with Tim Pool and Laura Loomer, where Laura, look, she did not present a good face. Really, she's not a good speaker, etc. Right. But he was worse. I mean, all he did was shriek about how bad Trump was. He only made 1 or 2 points that I even semi-agreed with. Right. But then you've got to what I thought was the actual more intellectual, smart, and reasonable side of the DeSantis wing, which was someone that you and I both follow, Steve Dace. Yeah. Someone who's an intelligent person. And look, I mean, was he anti-Trump in 2016? Yeah.
But a lot of people.
But that's what I was going to say. Tons of people were. And then I realized, oh, shoot, this guy's actually doing a lot better than we thought. And he ended up coming onto the Trump side. And then whenever I listen to Steve Dace criticize Trump, it's not, oh, you're a Russian stooge. Oh, you're this. Oh, you're that. Name calling. Overall, I mean, he has said Cheeto Jesus, and I found that to be in bad taste. But overall, he is more reasoned for, like, his big issue is COVID and Fauci. Yeah. That's a very good issue to get right. And Dace definitely gets that right. So my point is, what was fascinating to see is when DeSantis dropped out and kind of tactfully and half-heartedly endorsed Trump, seeing the different reactions in the DeSantis movement. Bill Mitchell was very, very, very angry about it, and he ended up endorsing Trump a few days later because he's a completely emotionally unstable person, in my view. Mm-hmm. He cannot make up his mind about anything, and I think he's going to dwindle to nothing eventually because people are going to be like, this guy's not serious. Right. Don't want to talk the whole podcast about Bill Mitchell because that we could go on and on. But anyway, Dace came out and said, look, he's not perfect, but Trump is our guy. I mean, we have to against Biden. There's really no other option. Yeah. Mitchell at first talked like he was going to go with RFK Jr. He ended up not doing that. And then someone said something that really was surprising to me. So Jenna Ellis, who helped Trump back in the 2020 election, she was one of his legal representatives. She also helped John MacArthur's church during COVID. Right. Because MacArthur publicly said, we're not staying closed down. We are opening. No masks, no social distancing. We're leaving it up to my congregation. If you want to socially distance, back away from people. Wear a mask if you want to. No problem. But we're opening up. And she was one of the people that legally represented him. Great. I applaud her for that. Wonderful. But she's been very, very strong against Trump, saying, I will not vote for him, nor should the DeSantis people, and I will support RFK Jr. or some third way, some independent person. Right. So I guess the question becomes, this is to circle back to RFK Jr. What do you see happening with the DeSantis supporters and also just conservatives in general? Those who, like Trump but don't love him, who really like DeSantis or maybe Vivek, do you see them going towards RFK Jr.? Do you see them staying home, or do you see them going with Trump?
Conservatives, like true conservatives or even DeSantis supporters now, no, I do not see them going towards RFK for a plethora of reasons, just based off what he stands on. And a lot of them won't vote for him just because he has D behind us,
Well, an I, because he's technically independent, but they know his history.
Right, exactly. And they know his history and everything. I mean, most of the voters on that side aren't stupid,
That's a good point.
Now Trump and Biden have some. We know Biden's got some stupid supporters, and Trump definitely. Everybody's got stupid supporters, and voters. But a lot of the DeSantis base, at least, isn't crazy wacko, for the most part. A lot of them wanted to vote for DeSantis because they wanted a change. As far as like, hey, a lot of this they not knew, but they kind of predicted what's going on right now. As far as they're trying to bog him down with the legal stuff, they're trying to do all this stuff with Trump, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So like, you know what? Let's get the new guy in, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's also guys that just wanted to vote for DeSantis because they liked his approach better. Also, they liked his record a little more than Trump, et cetera, et cetera.
Especially on COVID.
Right, exactly.
Which Trump did not command states to shut down, but whenever they started to reopen, he heavily criticized them.
Right.
At the time, he had Twitter still, and said, too soon, don't do it.
Right.
And then it became a vaccine salesman. DeSantis said the vaccine was good, but he made very clear, you have a choice, and your employer is not going to fire you for not getting it.
Right.
You are not allowed to discriminate. And that, that was flying in the face of everything Fauci wanted and the country, the direction of the country was going.
So I think, that's a lot of the reason that, some of the base for DeSantis was a thing. And then also there were people that wanted to vote for DeSantis who just couldn't because they felt a loyalty to Trump because they feel, back in 2020 he got robbed, so they owe him something. Now they don't owe him anything, but I can kind of, understand the, thought process to an extent. I don't think any of those voters are going to sway over to Junior. If anything, they sway towards either not voting or swaying to Trump, especially because DeSantis endorsed Trump anyway.
Right.
So yeah, that's my opinion on that. I don't see any of those guys voting for Junior at all.
Well, okay, and I get that completely, and I agree with you. So then the question becomes, right, so do you think that any of them were going to vote for RFK, but then this most recent interview regarding abortion was like, okay, you're out, I'm out?
I think some of them potentially, up until he started sticking his foot in his mouth with a bunch of stuff, and this most recent interview with the abortion thing. Some of them possibly would have. I mean, shoot, originally before I started like really looking into a lot of this stuff, it was like, oh, cool, anti-vax. This is, I like not cool anti-vax. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. However, I'm anti-certain vaccines. And also I'm
a vaccine that's not a vaccine.
Right, exactly.
Doesn't cure you, doesn't give you immunity.
Specifically the most recent one.
Yeah.
But I'm just more, in this case, pro-choice. It's your choice.
Medically, yeah.
Right. Well, you gotta be careful saying medically because technically considering abortion is a medical issue, even though it's less than 1% of the reason. But anyway, that's that point. Before he started, I guess, getting some publicity about some of his opinions, right? I think people were possibly going to vote for him as an alternative potentially. But anymore, no, I don't think he's got a chance at all.
So interesting thing. So I think you probably saw this, although it's not a foregone conclusion. Trump has been in interviews, and to me, nothing new was said, but rather recently, probably 2 weeks ago now, Trump was in an interview and was asked about abortion. And when I heard this, I said, well, duh, he's been saying this the entire time. And he basically said, I'm for exceptions, rape, incest, life with a mother, and it's a state issue. And he was asked, would you sign a national ban? And he did his standard thing of not really answering right?
The political answer.
So that being said, a lot, I don't know if you know this, but there's a woman, she's big in the pro-life movement, Abby Johnson. She's really big. Yeah. I'm pretty sure she went on Dr. Phil and took him to task because she said, look, there's a medical consensus that life begins at this point, and he tried to say it wasn't.
Right.
And she ended up having the facts on her side and cited the sources, right?
Yeah, Dr. Phil used to stick to psychology.
Not politics, right?
Not medical stuff.
So the point being here that and a number of other people did too, and said, look, Trump's not pro-life enough. And look, do I tend to agree with that? Of course I do.
Right.
I'm a no exceptions guy myself. But that being said, is he better than Biden? And is Biden or Trump going to be president? Yeah. And so my point, but see, here's the interesting thing. I'm sure that there were some people that were RFK supporters who were like, well, look, Trump's not pro-life enough. And then, ironically, RFK Jr. gets in this interview and it makes very clear he's way worse.
Right.
And so I think potentially some people stuck their foot in their mouth where they really were like, oh, pro-life, that's the big issue of my day.
Yeah.
And then look, you're supporting a pro-choicer.
Right.
Someone who said, had the honesty, to be fair, but said 9 months is not too long.
Oh, yeah.
So that's my thing is, if you're going to say abortion is the most important thing to you, then actually have abortion be the most important thing to you.
No
and don't, be consistent on it. And in this race, between Trump is going to be the best. Not nearly good enough, but better than the two alternatives.
But that's the problem that I have with it is because we started this whole thing with back when he got Roe v. Wade, banned and everything. Sure. Not banned, you know what I meant.
Overturned by the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Back when Roe v. Wade got overturned by the Supreme Court, and everything. He's that guy and celebrated it, et cetera, and now
still brings it up,
right? And still brings it up. But it's almost like we're backtracking because it's like, yeah, I did it, but there still needs to be this, that, and the other, and then doesn't go into detail about what this, that, and the other is, as far as again gives political answers. Well, what would you do, et cetera? I'd get a deal done that's good for everybody.
Yep.
Again, for me, that is a major issue, if not the top issue, because life is the most important thing. Preserving anybody's life is the most important thing for sure. Yeah, I have a problem because for me personally, it's one of those situations of voting for the lesser of two evils to an extent.
Three in this.
Well, yeah, lesser of three. Yeah, one I'm clearly not voting for.
Yeah.
Well, actually, two I'm clearly not voting for. But it's like, and again, will I vote Trump? Yes, unless he comes out and says, I'm going to make abortion legal again.
Really, it's less about voting for Trump, more about voting against Biden.
Right.
And I get that.
Right. But my problem still is it's still a backtrack to an extent because it's like he's backtracking on the things he's done, and or just doubling down on the things he's done, such as, the vaccine and stuff like that. So I have issues and reservations, because it's like because then got a question as far as, where's the country going to go if he's elected anyway?
Right.
Like, how far are we going to backtrack?
So,
what's going to happen?
So let's go into that because you said something toward the very beginning saying, well, but I think that if Trump does get in, we're still going to go downhill. Yeah. We're still going to go in the wrong direction. Yeah. So let's expand on that. What did you mean when you said that and why?
Personally, I think that this night, I believe you're going to disagree with me more than likely on this, but I think this is the least important election of our lifetime. I think 2020 was
hot take. It's always the most, right?
Right. Yeah. Hot take. It's always
that's gonna be the most controversial thing said on this podcast.
Yeah, right. Right. I mean, it's always the most important election.
Glenn Beck immediately disliked this video.
Right. It's always the most important election. Well, this time I think it's the least important.
Okay.
The reason is because 2020 was the most important, arguably. I mean, out of all of them, as far as the most important, clearly, back in Obama and stuff like that, that was pretty important and stuff. It wasn't the most important at the time, et cetera, et cetera. Because come to find out, Romney would have been pretty badasses and everything too.
And another guy who called that would be Mr. Steve Dace.
Right, exactly.
Deeply researched that guy and said, okay, we got major issues.
Right, exactly. So it's
this is evil and evil 2.
Right, exactly. So, and I'm not going to go as far to say, this is, evil 1, evil 2, evil 3 over here, But again, with the backtracking thing, I don't think we go anywhere with this stuff. Furthermore, let's say he does. The legal issues, the legal allegations, et cetera, et cetera. So even with Trump, if Trump gets elected over Biden, if that happens, right? What does it do to the party? What does it do? I don't see it doing anything. Then I don't think that Democrats will allow anything to happen because just with what they're doing with the legal allegations and everything, again, all of them pretty much farces, et cetera, and ridiculously insane, but I don't think he's going to be able to get anything done personally. Because again, we have seen how this guy has, operated with his hands behind his back. We get the lockdowns and everything else. So we've seen that you can force this guy's hand. But then the other thing, again, that worries me is we have him in the potential backtracking phases of things, or just doubling down on things that you and I strongly, I'll have huge reservations on, abortion and the vaccine within itself. So yeah, I personally think that either way, the country either slows its digression to an extent, I guess, and nothing really happens, but then the rest of the world still digresses, right? Or the digression is just sped up by voting for another 4 years for Biden. So that's my hot take. I don't think that this election is the most important, and also to an extent, the Republicans aren't doing anything for to stop any ballot harvesting or anything else. Any of these potential 2020's part 2 cheating to go on. So
the sequel,
right? Yeah. So since the Republicans aren't doing anything to stop it, I see no reason as to why this is the most important versus 2020.
Well,
I bought it in 2020. I don't buy it this year.
So here's the thing. I have to push back on that.
Right.
Only so specifically what you just said, like the last part of what you just said. So it was important in 2020. It's not important now. So in 2020, if I'm to take everything you said as true, it was as true back then as it is now. So if you want to talk about, okay, there were legal problems, Russiagate was starting to finally die off, but they were still saying tax returns for Trump. I'm saying the leftists.
Yeah, no,
they were still saying, and also you talked about how they used that to basically tie his hands behind his back. I mean, Fauci and was going on. I mean, that was 2020. Yeah. So if you see Trump's stance on COVID and it's unsatisfactory back then, and you looking at 2024 say it's still unsatisfactory. Yeah, I agree with you. But the point is, if it's important in 2020, why was it important in 2020? If you're saying now Trump is insufficiently conservative, he was insufficiently conservative in 2020. So I don't really know why one would be important and one would not.
The reason that I'm saying he's insufficiently conservative now versus 2020 is because of the fact that we didn't have him necessarily doubling down on everything as far as the vaccines as much as he is now. And then also the Roe v. Wade thing, he didn't necessarily come out and talk about yes, he talked about how he's the one that got it done, but that was virtually all he said. Now he's coming out with more stuff to kind of digress things back. So the reason that's the reason I say that is because we're going backwards with it, not what it was in 2020. Now, again, was he still that same guy in 2020? Probably. The thing is,
that's my point.
The media, as far as the things that he had said, was not out there as much at the time. We're just recently getting this stuff of what he said about, I'll get a deal done for, I'll get a deal done that everybody likes, et cetera, et cetera. You get what I'm saying? So that's my point, is we're now getting more open with where he's come to.
Mm-hmm. So, understood. My point would be, I mean, you kind of said it, is he was still that guy. I mean, I don't really see why, if Trump is saying now in 2024 as a former president that, hey, the vaccine, it was what I did and I'm proud of it. I don't know why, if he had been reelected in 2020, he wouldn't be saying the same thing. So and by that metric, if you're saying the election of 2024 isn't important, I would say the same for 2020. If you want to make that case, I would say at least it's consistent. I don't know if I buy it or not. And by the way, you're making a very persuasive argument. Yeah. And I'll just say, I don't quite go as far with it, far as you go.
Yeah.
But I probably go halfway or maybe a little more than halfway, because of the fact that I do think that, with Trump, there's a few things. So aid to Ukraine, we go from a yes to a maybe.
Right.
Immigration, an invasion at our border, we go from a yes to a maybe.
Right.
Now, to your point, back in 2016, well, really 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020, did Trump do enough? He did better than the alternative would have been. Mm-hmm. Is there still things like, did he finish the wall? No.
Right.
Should he have done more to do that? Yes, he should have done more. However, I mean, compared to Bush and even Reagan, but both Bushes for sure, he was way better on immigration. Right. And I give him a lot of credit and praise for that. The question becomes, though, okay, because this is something that actually I mentioned, and this is going to be the last time I mention this guy, but I'm going to say something positive about Bill Mitchell. One thing that Bill Mitchell said was on the campaign trail, his supporters, Trump supporters, were chanting "Lock her up" for Clinton.
Yeah.
Well, he gets in office, and guess what? Nothing happens.
Nothing happens. Right.
And he announced in the victory speech, well, she did a good job. She had a hard-fought campaign, and obviously, I'm not going to actually try and lock her up.
Right.
It may have been a few days after he got elected. And there's reasons for that, good and bad, whatever. I tend to disagree with that. I think that because he said on the debate stage, whenever I get in office, I'm going to appoint a special prosecutor.
Yeah.
To me, that's a campaign promise.
Right.
And if you break that, I have a huge issue with that.
For sure.
Now, he was great on so many issues, but that was a problem. And this is what Bill Mitchell said. He said, here's the thing. He said on the campaign trail this stuff, then he gets in, he doesn't do it. He thinks, and this is just a theory, but I think that there's some basis to it, is that's when the left said, you're a paper tiger. Right. You're not going to actually do what you said you're going to do, and now we're going to spring the trap that is Russiagate.
Right.
Now, I think they would have done Russiagate regardless, but I think that he definitely didn't help things by refusing. Now, here's the thing. When Trump gets back in, he has got to really crack down on the deep state, and that includes, but it's not limited to putting people in jail. I think if he does that, he'll be one of the greatest presidents we've had. Right. I'm not convinced he'll do it. Right. I have a feeling that right now he's talking tough. It's going to be 2016, but again, where he's going to get in there, and he might have some investigations, but ultimately no one's going to go to jail. No one's really going to have a threat of going to jail seriously. Right. And he's just going to do other stuff, which to me is not what he should do. What he should do is actually focus legislatively, judicially on how can we put these people in jail, have them arrested, etc. So I may be wrong. I mean, he's talking tough. Like, he will actually follow through. The question is, will he or not? Right. And look, whenever I think to myself, he probably won't, I tend to agree with you that it's probably not that important of an election. Right. Because he'll get in. Will the economy get better? Yeah. Other than that, I don't know what else will get better.
But the economy gets better, okay, but we still have the abortion issues. Every other issue.
Will he leave abortion alone? I likely think that he will not reverse it. Why would you do that? Right. But will he, in other words, carry that baton even further? He might not. He might just leave it completely alone. And is that better than a Democrat actively trying to attack it? Right. It is better. So, see, that Trump does have that going for him.
Right.
So that's the good thing he has going for him. But again, like I said, on immigration, he's talking tough. I'm going to have the biggest mass deportation in American history. Will he follow through on that? I mean, the thing is...
That I could see, yes.
Hopefully. Yeah. And if he does, again, he'll be one of the greatest presidents. We need that badly. I mean...
On deportation.
Estimates are 350,000 coming in every month.
Yep.
That's going to ruin the country.
No question.
We have to stop that.
No question.
Especially because some of them are working under the table and or sending the money back to their home country.
Right.
And because, I mean, that should, they don't have an investment in our country. And culturally, do we want our language to go from English to Spanish? I don't.
No.
The founding fathers voted back in the 17 and 1800s. They didn't vote on German, which was actually the second greatest language. Right. They voted on English.
Right.
Let's what am I trying to say? In the spirit of living up to that, of what the founders intended, let's do that again. Right. Let's say, look, we're not going with this. And, culturally, whenever I go into a store and see things written in English and Spanish, it's like, no, we're being taken over. And we shouldn't have that.
You feel like you're not necessarily in America, per se.
Not really. Yeah. I mean, now, if I was down in the Southwest, that'd be a little different because, well, sure, but see, people are used to that. They shouldn't be.
Right, yeah.
But in the East Coast, which is where you and I live in the deep South, this ought not to be, and it is.
Right.
So a lot of it, look, is woke pandering, but this is why it's such a big issue, and it's a huge issue that I think Trump will do something about. Now, will he actually build the wall? I don't know. And see, this is where the rhino phenomena is so important. So you said something else that I absolutely agree with you, because to me, in your this isn't a very important election, you hit two things. Your heaping big portion was Trump. Then you had a little side of the Republicans in the House.
Right. Yeah.
And on
it's
that
not
issue,
just the Trump.
And on that issue, you and I 100% agree.
Right.
I mean, when I look at the Republican Party, where we ought to be and where we are, it's horrible.
Yeah. Two total different.
Where we ought to be is everyone should be right there with DeSantis and Vivek and Trump, at least in rhetoric, right? And hopefully in follow through too. But it's way off base. It's way more John McCain, way more John Kasich. Nikki Haley's another good one to bring up. That's where the party seems to be, unfortunately.
Right.
So, my final point, I guess, is, look, are there issues with Trump? Absolutely going to agree with you on that. But at least with Trump, we go from a no to a maybe, which is why you said it's the least important election. However, you said you would still vote for Trump.
Yes.
Because
of, I guess, holding on to hope.
Sure. And again, I think that he would do better. But this is where I kind of want to go into the future. So we'll go into the future, and then we'll probably have in our part 2, we're going to hit the stuff on college campuses.
Yeah, for sure.
And it'll be a separate video for you guys watching. So real quick, while I talk about this, I'm going to adjust the camera and see if I can stop it from fogging up. But regarding the future, let's pan back from 2024. Let's talk about 2028.
Yep.
How do you see things going? I mean, do you see with 2028? Are you hopeful? Are you not hopeful?
No.
So there's two scenarios. Let's talk real quickly about 2024. So real quick, and we can come back to this later. With 2024, do you see Trump winning or losing?
At this point in time, losing.
Okay. Legitimately or illegitimately?
Illegitimately, yes.
Sure.
But I still see him losing. And even if he wins, I see the Dems ramping up what they tried in 2020 as far as impeachment and everything. So, because I mean, shoot, the Dems have convinced people of our quote unquote own party that Trump is, Hitler, the bad guy,
an insurrectionist, all
right, exactly. But in reality, the Republicans are the bad guys as far, and the Dems do. But I mean, as far as everybody's the ones causing this, not just Trump. As far as so I just see, even if he wins it, he still technically loses it to an extent. Just because they're going to tie his hands so much. They know how to tie this guy's hands now. I personally believe.
Yeah.
And they'll come up with something. I think that they've got all the options. I don't think that the Democrats are stupid. So I think that they've got all the options. All right. So in case we can't cheat enough somehow or whatever, in case this happens, well, guess what? We're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
We got plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Sure. Well, but then the question becomes, so should Trump get in or not? I think, and you can disagree with this, that the Trump treatment, we'll just say, that's going to be the standard from now on. Right. I truly believe that when a threat to the system, even a maybe, not necessarily a yes, but a maybe, springs up, they will treat them like they treat Trump. So let's say DeSantis, this is my point why I wanted to talk about 2028.
Yeah, for sure.
Whether it be Vivek or DeSantis, some unnamed person we're not really familiar with, but that all of a sudden rears his head, or conversely, like Trump, someone who we knew about but thought, I didn't know his politics, something kind of like that. A lot of people are like, I didn't know Trump felt this way about this. Shows up. To me, if they're an actual threat to the system, if they're not towing the line of the Bush administration stuff, they're going to get treated how Trump did. Racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, and or legal issue after legal issues, whatever, accusations nonstop. So my point is, the only issue I have with you bringing up things like, they're going to tie his hands. I think that's just a reality for the foreseeable future.
For sure.
So that's my thing. I don't really view that as a way to that this is an unimportant election, because I view it as this is just a reality.
Right.
The Democrats hate losing, and they hate the idea of someone getting in power and taking away their power.
Right.
Because power to them is power politics is everything. They want to be in charge, cramming policies down your throat.
Oh, yeah.
And when someone steps in who may stop that, then they have a problem. Then they have their little fit.
No question.
So I guess the question becomes: let's say, let's just ignore for the moment, and we'll come back to it, whether Trump wins or doesn't win.
Right.
Let's just say, for the sake of argument, 2028 happens, whether he wins or not.
Yeah.
Trump is not running again. So if he wins, obviously he can't run for a third term.
Right.
If he loses, let's just say he says, "Nah, I'm not going to." Which I think, by the way,
that's respectable.
By the way, I think that if he loses, I hope he doesn't run again, because if he does, I don't think he's going to have the energy from the base. I think they're going to say, "Look, you're in your 80s now. Yeah. We've got to find someone better."
Starts to kick in,
and it almost has.
You're right, exactly.
Yeah, it almost has. People are asking questions. Hey, you're in your 70s, you know, but they're going for him anyway, and I understand why.
Right.
But I think in another cycle, it'll be way worse. People are going to say, "Okay, you're about to hit 80, and we cannot vote for you." At that point, he would be 81.
Right.
So I don't see it happening. So point being, and what I'm trying to say here, that Trump's not running. Who do you see stepping up to the plate, good and bad? I'll just start off. I think Haley definitely runs again. And she's a disaster, but she runs again. She's power hungry.
She's Democrat. Huh?
Well, in a lot of ways,
Same with Chris Christie. He's
another one. I see him running at some point. And I do see some of the cast of characters from 2016. I've been saying this running again. I'm surprised more of them didn't in 2024. I remember saying that a lot of them were going to be the same. And really only Christie is the only one I can really think of who tried to run again. Other than that, most of them were sort of new in the sense of they hadn't run for president before. So anyway, point being, to me, DeSantis definitely going to run again at some point. I don't know if it's 2028. I think likely so. Vivek has a future. I think he will run again. Yeah, don't do that.
That's mine.
Yeah. Vivek will run again at some point or another. I do think Rubio will run. I do think Cruz will run. I wouldn't be surprised if Pence tried to run again. Pence is not as old as he looks. He's only in his early 60s.
Pence will run.
So I think he'll run. I wouldn't be surprised if Tim Scott will run. I think he probably will. I don't know about Burgum. He may or may not. I wouldn't be surprised about Kristi Noem too, who the governor of South Dakota. She might, and he's governor of North Dakota.
I've heard some.
So we can talk about her. So
sorry, I'm not trying to change the subject.
No. So real quickly, she's had a couple. So number one, let me just say real quickly for the record, I don't think she's that bad. I think she's all right. I kind of like her.
I just know she's been getting backlash.
So I'll go about the recent one last, but real quickly. So probably about the time of 2020, 2021, the NCAA was going to have a women's basketball game in her state. Mm-hmm. And just to inform the viewers, she said, I'm not going to have a governor's law written about can a woman or can a trans woman, so a man, play against women. I'm going to let the courts decide legally what is the legal definition of a woman,
so
whatever.
You're not taking the DeSantis approach.
Well, she was not hands-on like he is,
right.
Yes. And see, that was where she got a lot of criticism.
Right.
Now, I don't think that she would, because people said, okay, you're copping out. Maybe, maybe not. That's a tough one, because I could kind of understand her saying, look, if you got a problem with this, tell your judges, hey, you better not let us down, because it's technically the judge's role to interpret law, things like that.
For sure.
So
yes and no.
That's a hard one for me. I don't view it as a huge issue. A lot of people got really mad at her because she was showing a lot of promise. They thought, because one thing about it is DeSantis sort of shut down the state and Noam never did.
Right.
So now again, sort of, in the sense that DeSantis never said, if you are open, you will be prosecuted. He just basically said, hey guys, stay home. Stuff like that.
It was a government suggestion.
Yeah, it was not a command, like a lockdown.
Right.
And Noam didn't even go that far. She just basically said, do what you want to do, and that's how it is.
Right.
And so she got a lot of praise at the time. Well, then that came out with the NCAA, and she got a ton of criticism. Well, anyway, so then what happened most recently? Well, so recently she wrote a book, and I haven't read it, I'll just tell you. Mm-hmm. But in the book, she told a story about a time she had to put down a horse. Or actually, no, it was a family dog.
Okay.
A dog that had gotten too old, and she had to take him out and shoot him. Now, regardless of what you think about that, there's an unfortunate time where you have to euthanize an animal.
Right.
That's just a reality of life. It's heartbreaking. It's sad. It's sad that we live in a world where health issues come up and age catches up with animals.
Yeah,
but people don't bat an eye when you take a dog or a horse or whatever and have it euthanized. But on a farm, when you take it out to the back and shoot it, people feel very differently about it. Now, here's the thing.
Other stuff. Yeah.
Here's the thing. So my view on it is, okay, I don't have a problem with you doing that on a farm. That's farm life. For crap's sake, don't tell that in a book.
Yeah.
Especially if you are going to run for office one day.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I don't put all my business out there on this platform.
Right.
My wife, my life, all that stuff.
There's
things
say.
you don't do. And so to me, it kind of came across as just like kind of like the awkward thing at the family reunion where uncle such and such, or aunt in this case such and such, is going on and on. You're like, all right, that's a fascinating story about your trip to the bathroom, but we really don't need to hear about your trip to the bathroom right now. We really would like to just talk about other stuff here. And unfortunately, it was kind of not the time, not the place.
Yeah.
As a result, now I will say that memes have been lit. Like there was one time, there was a Kentucky Derby, I think recently, and one of the horses was last and was kind of limping real bad. And I think Matt Walsh made a joke about where's Christy Nolan when you need her or something like that. Yeah. So some of the jokes have been really funny, and there's been other ones too. I forget what all. There's been several. There's another one. There was one Matt Walsh posted about a bunch of pit bulls that were attacking people. Said, where's Christy Nolan when you need her? Yeah. So some of the memes have been fired. They've been awesome. But that being said, that's the most recent little controversy. And again, I don't dislike her as a person. Now, I'll say, I've brought it up before. She spoke at the NRA convention right after Uvalde. Yeah. She was very well spoken, very smart, very intelligent. She's also spoken at CPAC and done fine. I don't think she's necessarily completely anti-establishment, but neither do I think she's a tool of the deep state. Right. I think she's just kind of a regular Republican who would be fine as she's fine as a governor. I think that's probably her role. I don't necessarily see her being a president one day necessarily, because I don't know if she has that sort of leadership style. I just don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
And also, do you still believe that you can trust the courts? I guess that's part of my issue.
Well, it's hard.
I respect it, but at the same time, the courts are Democratic run.
Yeah, in many ways. Now, maybe in I'm sorry, not Colorado. Maybe in South Dakota, not so much. I don't know. Right. But the point is, those are the controversies she's been in. Yeah. Oh, well, there's that. That would be a good question to bring up on the campaign trail. Should she run? Hey, so in South Dakota, you said this. How would you feel about that as president? Right. Would you let things just ride in the Supreme Court, or would you lead, have legislative policy, stuff like that? Right. And that's a legit question to ask. Right, for sure. So that's the situation there. I got you. To go back to what we were talking about, meaning the future, I think she'll run. I do think a lot of the same cast of characters previously will run as well, good and bad. I think that I would love for someone to run like Trump did in 2016 and Vivek did in 2024, but not be Vivek. I would like someone with Christian values in office, not a Hindu.
And that was the big reservation.
Sure.
Well, one of the big reservations.
And by reservation, you're not talking about him being Indian.
Yeah.
He's not that kind of Indian.
No, not that.
He's also not that kind of Indian.
No, not going there. No.
He's also from the Dot kind, not the Apache kind. So
right.
Anyway, I had to get that in there somehow. Yeah. So point being, I think there's going to be a mixture, and I think it's going to be important. So if the election looks like 2020 and 2024. The question is going to be in 2028, okay, candidates, how do you fix it? And I don't think that there's really an answer on the federal level. I don't think a presidential candidate can really do that. I think it's got to be a state issue. It's got to be, okay, Georgia, get your crap together, for example. Yeah. Okay, Michigan, are you going to certify faulty ballots or not? Right. And the question becomes, okay, what do you do about it? I don't really know if it can be solved federally. I think it almost has to be solved at the state level. And I would like to hear your thoughts on that before we go to a part two. But what are your thoughts regarding 2028? I mean, do you think that we're going to get better candidates, about the same, worse? What would you say?
If we get there.
If we have an election.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the only one that I'm kind of looking forward to as far as 2028, if we get there and everything, and I'm being serious when I say that. Yeah, if we get to 2028, the only one that I'm really looking forward to is DeSantis. I think he will run. I think he's like, I guess you could say the predecessor for Trump. Not predecessor.
Successor.
Yeah, successor.
The other
My
one.
bad. Yeah, the other one. Successor.
They know
to,
the thing to quote
right.
Joe Biden.
Yeah.
To quote Joe Biden, they
Yeah,
know
the thing. But I think that he's just the next guy up, and based off history and everything, you know, he would be the only one that I'm kind of interested in. I guess again, you know, possibly known to an extent. There would be some potential reservation, I guess, to an extent.
And again, this has nothing to do with her being in South Dakota.
Right. And Vivek, I worry about him. Just because there's no history with him for one, and also he gives off a 2016 Trump vibe, which is great. But the question is, how much of that are you actually? He also gives off an Obama vibe as far as the way he talks.
Change.
Right. So it's like, how much of what you're saying is true versus are you just kind of talking, you know, just talk, you know? So yeah, the one that I'm really looking forward to is DeSantis, but again, that's if we get there, you know.
Right. So
and if it even matters at that point.
So there's a lot there. I think that with Vivek, I see a lot of promise, but the question you have very cogent criticisms of him because the question becomes, okay, how much of this is show and flash, and is there substance underneath? Because I will say one thing about Trump is, you know, someone pointed this out, and I thought it was some very good analysis on Trump, is that Trump on a good day doing the best that he can is not a quarterback, he's not a receiver, he's not a linebacker, he's a broken field runner. Right. Because what does he do? He sees something he wants to do, and he runs in zigzags towards it. He goes this way, then he goes this way, then he goes this way. And sometimes he gets one down, and he's really, really effective and good. I think what we would need is someone like DeSantis on a good day, who's basically what I can tell a quarterback. Right. All right, I'm going to delegate this here, and if you don't do a good job, your butt's on the line, so you better work hard at it. In other words, someone who can actually delegate, but not delegate poorly and like, well, this guy didn't get it done and my hands are washed clean of it. Someone who will hold them accountable and say, look, I'm coming in here basically like a CEO or a big boss, and you are going to accomplish the agenda. And if you don't, then, you know, you're not going to be funded. You know, we're going to either kick you out, fire you, or you're going to be reelected or whatever. Right. I'm going to support someone primarying you, whatever the situation is. And see, someone needs to come in there and do that, not just for the executive branch, but for all of Congress too. Because one thing that is key for a Republican president is who they endorse, especially if they get elected. Because then they get the power of saying, all right, you are bad, and this is a big criticism I have of Trump. Why are you endorsing so many bad people? Right. And someone ideally that was better on that would then change and say, okay, this person is a deep state shill. South Carolina, vote them out, something like that. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's hugely important as well. And the question is, okay, would Vivek do that or not? Would he just basically get a list from the RNC and just say, all right, I endorse such and such, which is basically what Trump does. And I feel like we're being hard on Trump, but these are cogent criticism. We're not just saying, oh, bad, Orange Man bad. Right. So to move on now, we got to come to part two. Let's in part two, we're going to very quickly, you know, summarize or end this topic, but then we've got to talk about what's going on college campuses. And so, guys, definitely check out part two. Definitely remember to subscribe if you haven't already, like this video and comment, and check out part two where Nathan and I talk about college campus protests, and we will look forward to seeing you in that video.